There are a lot of different organizations out there that deal with various aspects of illicit trade. And the longer I worked in these different sectors, the more apparent it became that there were various crossovers and synergies and similarities in counterfeiting or falsified medicines or illicit trade in forestry or even fishing. And we had realized that there was no sort of unified approach in dealing with these commonalities, and that's what gave birth to Trace It. So this is a bit of a summary. The SDGs, like I encourage you to look a little bit more deeply into this. It's closely tied to the objectives of your organization. And each of the goals has a number of targets underneath them to stop violence, to stop the exploitation of women in this case, to build trust in legal institutions, rule of law, to stop illicit financial flows, to stop corruption and terrorism. So as you can see, this was written several years ago. I didn't just make this slide up. And as you can see, there are direct parallels to almost everything I've said up to this point, where illicit trade is the commercial backbone of criminal activity. So last year was a bizarre year for everyone, from the way we work to the way our children are educated to the way we shop at the grocery store. And I don't think I've been involved in any meeting or frankly any conversation that hasn't started with COVID-19. And it's exhausting. But it commands our attention. And I think that there's an inclination, a human inclination for everyone to reorient everything they're doing to COVID-19. And I really don't feel that way. And I think in the world of illicit trade, I've tried to resist making too much out of a situation that we seriously hope will end soon. But within that context, there are certainly three areas where illicit traders capitalized on the fears of consumers and the breakdowns in law enforcement, and the shortcomings of our global supply chain. Every government, local or national, was grappling with ways to contain the virus. How do we do it? How do we implement social distancing? No one had ever really done this before, and part of that calculus was imposing supply restrictions on beverages. In some cases, in the worst case countries were India, South Africa, and Mexico, and Panama. We could throw Panama in there as well, where they imposed 100% prohibition laws on production, transport, distribution, sale, online sale, offline sale. And well, a lot of you are college students, so I think your econ knowledge is pretty up to speed. What happens if you reduce the supply of one product? It's pretty simple. Econ 101, consumers pursue substitutes. Now, in the case of alcohol, in a lot of these countries that I mentioned, there was already a market for illicit substitutes. I think that number was as much as 25%. In some African countries, that number is sometimes near as 50% of the markets. There are three things that I'd like to share about this, and one of them is that the COVID-19, the scenario around the pandemic, revealed that unquestionably, irrefutably, organized criminal activity underpins illicit trade. And as I said before, illicit trade is the commercial engine of organized crime. That came out over and over and over again. Again, studies have been published by some of those main organizations that I mentioned, including us. The other observation is sometimes, whether it's policymakers or whether it's consumers or whether it's just, the common understanding is that somehow counterfeits or fraudulent or fake products are a harmless crime. Well, that's not true, because what we learned is that there is a lot of personal injury behind this. And I think the example that we've pointed out mostly is what happens when people consume, these fraudulent alcoholic beverages and end up dying from it. And I think the third main point that we want to say is a lot of times we're addressing illicit trade or counterfeiting, we look at it from the IP perspective, or we look at it from the trade perspective of unfair competition. But I think one of the things that stood out the most for us during the last year was, in all cases, this is all about consumer fraud. And what can these, illicit traffickers do, to take advantage of, in this case, fear, to impose consumer fraud. These organizations, the World Customs Organization, ICE here in the US, the DHS, Europol, Olaf, Interpol, they cracked down on this trade like I had never seen before, delivering amazing results in a time where, people were locked down in some countries, where it might be difficult, to get to a border, do border control, or where the internet, where monitoring the internet was a job that was triple or quadruple in size, and they delivered amazing results. And I have been thinking about this, is that what the lockdown has shown us is that when these types of law enforcement agencies prioritize a problem, and when they are properly resourced, they can deliver amazing results. The last 10 years, we've been watching, we all individually have been shopping online more and more. We've read interesting stories in USA Today about the growth. We've read about shopping malls shutting down because consumers aren't going to the mall so much, they're shopping online. And we've heard projections of how that's going to be part of our future. Well, what happened in the last year is we got a glimpse into that future, a big, serious glimpse into that future, where the e-commerce shopping numbers just went through the roof. This is what the future is going to look like and more. And the lesson to take away from this is we are currently woefully unprepared to deal with precluding and mitigating illicit trade on our e-commerce platforms, whether it's the shopping platforms or whether that's the social media platforms. So when I come out of the lockdown, these are the two things that I'm going to be pounding my fist on the table about.